All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a wildly unconventional, but honestly, completely brilliant way to outmaneuver your competition at work. We're actually going to look at the brutal, high-stakes logic of mixed martial arts, MMA, and translate it directly into your business strategy. If you've ever looked at a super skilled colleague or a rival company and thought, man, there is no way I can beat them at their own game, well, you're exactly right. You really shouldn't even try. Instead, we're going to learn how to completely dismantle their foundation using the exact same analytical mindset a champion fighter uses in the ring.
To really wrap our heads around this, picture this famous MMA bout. The story actually starts with a devastating loss. It's the highly anticipated revenge match between Kyoji Horiguchi and the younger of the famous Asakura brothers. In their very first fight, Horiguchi got knocked out cold on a counterpunch. But why? Well, because his opponent's team had obsessively analyzed him and discovered this tiny, almost invisible habit. Whenever Horiguchi threw a right hook, his face naturally tilted just a fraction to the left. It was a microscopic tell, kind of like biting your lip when you're bluffing at poker. But in the cage, that little tilt cost him the entire fight. His opponent just waited for that exact moment, exploited the habit, and boom, ended it. So going into the rematch, the stakes were incredibly high, and everybody thought they knew exactly what Horiguchi had to do to adapt.
So going into this rematch, everyone, and I mean everyone, assumed they knew the game plan. The opponent was this massive striker, right? Just unbelievable punching power. Now, conventional wisdom says if you're fighting a powerhouse striker, you avoid their fists entirely by taking them down to the mat. You essentially try to wrestle it out on the ground where they can't throw those huge punches. But Horiguchi? He completely threw conventional wisdom out the window. Instead of shooting for a takedown, he went with a totally different weapon, the calf kick. Well, let's think about the actual physics of throwing a literal knockout punch. To understand why this strategy was pure genius, you have to realize that for a striker to unleash that kind of devastating power, they can't just be light and bouncy on their feet. No way. They absolutely must plant their weight heavily onto their front leg to generate all that force. That front leg is essentially their anchor. Horiguchi figured out that instead of trying to dodge the flying fists, he just needed to destroy the anchor. So he relentlessly attacked that planted front leg with calf kicks. The result? He won with a spectacular knockout in just a few hits.
And that right there brings us to the absolute core lesson of this explainer. Horiguchi didn't win because he had better punches than his opponent. He won because he completely avoided a head-on collision with his opponent's greatest strength. He realized that every single strength out there requires a specific prerequisite to exist. He looked at the underlying premise, the foundation, the structure that allowed that striking power to exist in the first place. When you shift your own mindset to say, I'm going to look at the structure, not the person, literally everything changes. You stop asking, how do I beat their punches? And you start asking what actually has to happen for them to be able to punch. You attack the foundation holding their strength up.
Okay, so let's pull this out of the cage and bring it into the office, because the exact same rules of structure and preparation apply to your career. That brings us to Section 1. Matches versus practice, weekdays versus weekends.
Basically, you need to completely rethink your calendar. Think of it like this. Monday through Friday, those are your matches. The weekend, that's your practice. If you want to actually yield results during the week, you've got to do the prep work on the weekend. The pros, the people who consistently win, they use their weekends to decide exactly where the next week's battles are going to be fought. They break down the conditions for winning, and they gather all their intel and resources in advance. And because they do all that heavy lifting up front, the actual weekday just becomes a simple confirmation process. They're literally just executing a plan for a battle they've already won.
But then you have the folks who just wing it. They stroll into the office on Monday morning and try to figure it all out on the fly. That is exactly like stepping into an MMA ring without ever watching tape on your opponent. You are guaranteed to hesitate, fall behind, and totally burn yourself out. There's this quote from the source material that just hits the nail on the head. Saying you are busy on a weekday usually just means you are losing. Let that sink in for a second. Being frantic isn't a badge of honor. It just means you don't have a strategic structure in place. So you've got your weekend prep dialed in. Now we need to figure out who is actually in the ring with you. Let's get into Section 2, Team Sport, Winning Together. It is time to absolutely shatter the toxic myth of the solo grind.
When you watch MMA, it looks like this solitary gladiator-style battle, right? Just one person under the bright lights. But it's actually the ultimate team sport. Behind every great champion is a highly functioning corner. You've got an analyst gathering the data, a strategist finding the unique angles, and an expert who knows how to spot and fix weaknesses in real time.
You only get the win when all those pieces lock together. And business is exactly the same. If you try to do everything yourself, you are going to hit a wall fast. To win, you have to leverage your corner. Bring in the analyst who has the data. Work with the strategist who sees the long game. Tap into the field expert who knows what's actually happening on the ground. You have to integrate their strengths to fight as one unified structure. Now, let's be real for a second. Even if you relentlessly attack the structure, even if you prep all weekend and build a phenomenal team, sometimes you're still going to take a hit and not get the result you wanted. How you react in that exact split second defines everything. Which leads us to Section 3, Destroying Excuses, the Game Over Moment.
It's just human nature, right? We fail and instantly we look for a scapegoat. Oh, the market's bad right now. My boss just doesn't get it. The timing was totally off. But the source material is crystal clear on this. The absolute second you blame uncontrollable factors, the fight is over. It's a literal game over moment. Why? Because by putting the blame on something outside of your control, you completely paralyze your own ability to make the next move. You've basically convinced yourself that your hands are tied and there's nothing left to do.
So instead of tapping out, you need to build a rhythmic cycle of resilience. We call it the action cycle. When you fail, and you will, what do instead of complaining? You fight back. You look at the structure all over again. You test your approach, you shift your perspective to see where the structure is weak, you fix that gap, and then you repeat the whole thing. Just keep spinning that cycle. Because at the end of the day, ultimate victory doesn't usually go to the person who won the very first round. It goes to the person who relentlessly kept analyzing the structure, making adjustments, and fighting back.
So, let's bring it all together. I want to leave you with something to really think about today. Think about your biggest, most frustrating workplace challenge right now. Maybe it's a colleague you just can't seem to outshine, a competitor you can't outsell, or a massive project that feels totally impossible. Ask yourself, are you exhausting all your energy trying to fight their strength head-on? Because remember, every single strength has a prerequisite condition holding it up. Your job is to find out what that condition is. Shift the battleground. Stop fighting the person and start dismantling their structure.